ISO 9000 is a very good international standard concerning how to have your quality organization, which means how do you write your procedures? Are the procedures in accordance with laws and regulations? And are those procedures available to people? Are they updated on a regular basis? Are reviewed? Do they have a proper person who has approved them, who's accountable for the procedures? And also that what should occur there, how do you achieve objectives through those procedures? And so they adopted, again, ISO 5000, ISO 9000. They were also involved in an industry group that created what's called API Recommended Practice 1173, which has to do with pipeline safety systems. You can look that up on the web. It's a very good document, you know, API 1173. But it also, that document, PG&E was involved in it, as well as a lot of the other leading gas utilities were involved in the creation of API 1173. And it also is very similar to some other management system standards that it requires conformance testing. It's the same thing that happens with ASTM and ISO standards, where you have a group of experts, and these are experts, and they're called experts, and they talk, they gather, they vet standards, they try to have the best standard they can that is useful to the public. And during that process, they test one another, you know, as to the knowledge of what is the best idea. So you have what's a cumulative best ideas of those of the leaders in industry. And so when you take a look at those standards, that's the product of those groups. And again, that happens with API 1173. It also happens with all the ASTM 53 standards, but also happens with the ISO standards we've involved in. Yes, there should be some sort of assurance. And, you know, a lot of us are familiar with assurance that it happens, you know, through public accounting firms, that companies are required to have internal controls over financial reporting. And that results in some sort of assurance that the public can look at that review by the public accounting firm and rely that based upon their review of the books and records of that particular company, that what the company is stating publicly has been confirmed through inspection and testing. Matter of fact, PG&E did in fact go through ISO 55000 and were certified through ISO 55000. They had an external company that looked at their processes. One thing, you know, about the article that is in there is that when PG&E was asked, did they want the electric side to go through ISO 55000? Because ISO 55000 could apply to all portions of their company, but they chose to limit it to the gas portion. Now, since they've adopted ISO 55000, I think that was finally approved like in 2015. I haven't read any more explosions from PG&E, but what you saw in the slide was what happened with PG&E, where they had these fires, where a hook somehow broke. You know, you had a piece of equipment that's like 100 years old, and it somehow broke. A live wire fell to the ground and started a fire. Maybe two fires. Ultimately, what happened with that is that there were 84 people who died in those fires in 2018 in California. And the president of PG&E just a few months ago pled guilty to involuntary manslaughter on 84 counts. Right now, they're in bankruptcy. And they haven't, I don't believe they've come out through that yet. But basically, they bet on the company by having bad policies and actions on things that which they didn't know or should have known. What happens with companies, and of course, a lot of companies, there's a lot of good folks in the companies, but sometimes there are situations where they're compartmentalized, they're siloed, that one side cannot communicate to the other properly, and so they may not necessarily be seeking out weaknesses of their overall system. As a result, things happened even though people knew they were weak, but did not do anything to correct those weaknesses. And so for gas industry, what 1173 did, it requires a system, just like ISO 9000 required a system of corrective action requests. And they would be tracked and somebody would be accountable to correct those issues. And then that would remain open as a corrective action until in fact completed. Those types of systems can help companies to recognize weaknesses and correct those weaknesses. However, if companies don't have that system, and if the culture does not allow for prompt action, then that creates weaknesses for all, and that's how disasters occur. I mentioned that one of the things that I do now, I buy real estate, and we fix real estate and we rent real estate. And one piece of property I purchased, it's a fairly new property. It was built in like mid-50s, and nice house. But the person happened to be on one of these programs that reverse mortgage. When the person died, it wasn't picked up, and therefore it went through foreclosure. And so it was empty for about 2 years. And so when I bought the property, I asked for the gas to be turned on, and the gas company told me, well, we can't turn our gas because we abandoned your line. Now, a lot of us in property management, we understand abandonment, particularly if we're involved in the government property arena. You know that a government contractor, for example, cannot abandon government property. The only person who can abandon government property is an official from the government, plant clearance office or something of the like. And so in abandonment, the only person who can abandon property is the owner. Well, they claim they had abandoned my property. And I said, well, you can't do that. Well, we did. So then they asked me to go ahead and replace it at my own cost. Well, that started a conflict. And I appealed that up through their management all the way up to the CEO and CFO of the corporation, and eventually even to the board of directors. They didn't back up. They required me to replace my line. And if I didn't do that, I wouldn't get gas. I eventually took them to small claims court. There in small claims court, they claimed that the jurisdiction of the small claims court could not adjudicate it because it had to go through the Public Utilities Commission. So I lost that. Took it down to the Common Pleas Court. Same thing happened. Interesting enough, though, is that the Public Utilities Commission doesn't have authority to provide judgments for private individuals. So they essentially misrepresented their authority to those courts. So I've been involved hanging with the Public Utilities Commission on my case since May of 2017. Here again, these things, when you think of delays, delays can cause problems. Delays can cause procrastination regardless, and cause continued harm to people.
And what was it that happened in Boston?
Well, so what happened is that here again, you have companies that when they're on the wrong track as far as how they correct their own problems, how they do their own procedures, how the culture itself can cause their problems can just wait to happen. For example, one of the things that I noticed in my situation, I noticed that one, they were using uncalibrated equipment. Well, they were supposed to use calibrated equipment, but just didn't. That companies are supposed to use things like lockout, tagout. A lot of times that occurs and it's required in OSHA. You see it in electricity, but it all occurs in all type of energy sources, so that that things are controlled. So everybody knows that you can't interfere with something that's locked out, and if you do, it causes problems. They had a lockout tag problem in Boston, and they also had a situation where they had they're supposed to have pressure limiting devices, and what happened with that is that most of these gas lines, they operate at 0.5 psi. Well, a lot of times they have regulators on them that may be coming in at 9 psi or whatever, and the regulator takes it down to 0.5 psi. Well, and they were upgrading some lines, but they didn't realize is that their lockout tagout procedure wasn't working properly. So eventually, what happened is that they put through 9 psi into homes that were designed for 1/2 psi, and that impacted appliances, and it caused leaks within those homes. And when I did that, there were multiple homes that exploded in fires, and it greatly impacted around the Merrimack Valley in Massachusetts. That particular company, however, they started doing the emergency, and the governor of Massachusetts decided they weren't doing it properly, and therefore he put in another utility for the cleanup process. Eventually, what happened is that the company did plead guilty to Pipeline Safety Act violations, and they were required to pay fines of $53 million. I think the state wants them like another $54 million in fines.
And Rich,
they were required to required to sell the company. So they got expelled.
So, and these are just the gas asset management disasters.
Those are just,
as we know, Minnesota, the bridge fell, and as Jim Dieter has said, our bridges aren't falling down because we don't know how to maintain bridges. Our bridges are falling down because leadership is not empowering the people to do the jobs that they know they should be doing. So I think these disaster stories are a call for leaders to adopt the processes that will help prevent them. So,
absolutely. And what ISO 5000 does, it makes, it makes folks go through a property management plan, a strategic property management plan, and again, they should be looking, and that should be broad, so that they address the risk and opportunities associated with their particular business, and so they are able to take advantage of the opportunities, but at the same time, make sure that risks are also considered and minimized. First of all, I like to go through what's the current requirements, essentially by law, and that is that companies should have internal controls, and those internal controls actually essentially occurred, with internal controls that were financial reported, which started in 1934. 2013, the CASO organization, which is from folks from leading accounting organizations, had internal controls over financial reporting, but also effective efficient operations and compliance with laws and regulations. And so if they actually took, and part of that is also protection of assets. So if companies work what's required right now, that puts a long way to what should occur with assets, because assets management sit on top of that. Let's deal with the Department of Defense property. Under FAR 45, point I think it's 102, under solicitation, it requires plans and standards of which are used and best practices that are applicable to that particular contract. So the government is very much aware of plans and requirements for that. Also, like for DOD, for example, they under their internal procedure, which is 5000.64 on how to manage personal property, that also applies to ASTM 2279, which is the ASTM standard for how to manage property of the guiding principles. Now, I may have said, for example, I may have used the word STAMP, but that STAMP means Strategic Asset Management Plan. And in those plans, we've been again, ASTM 2279 was issued in like 2013. And those plans have been required for a long time, and which came before ISO 55000. So I think that the use of plans has pretty well always has been accepted for a long time.